somewhere between 8 and 15%. That's the current estimate for about how many Dobermans in this world are blue Dobermans. Not terribly common, but they are great looking dogs. Now, when you mention a blue Doberman to most people, usually they picture something kind of similar to this. But in reality, as you just saw, these Dobermans look a lot more like this. Their hair is more of a kind of a gray color. In fact, many people do refer to them not just as blue Dobermans, but they'll refer to them as gray Dobermans, silver Dobermans, or even on occasion, purple Dobermans. Now, blue Dobermans are not part of the normal breed standard for European Dobermans as set by the FCI, but here in America, for American Doberman Pinschers, they are one of the 4 standard colors for Dobermans. Those standard colors are the black and rust, red and rust, the blue Doberman, and the fawn or Isabella Doberman. So being that they're one of the standard 4 colors in the US, that means the blue Dobermans can compete in conformation shows and all the other standard competitions that the AKC puts on. So how does a blue Doberman even exist? Well, actually, these blue Dobermans were genetically set up to kind of just be your standard black and rust colored Doberman. The only difference with these dogs is that their parents had a recessive color dilution gene. And what this dilution gene did was kind of dilute the pigmentation that would have otherwise gone into the black coats. So the dog came out with less pigmentation, and it wasn't a solid black dog anymore. It was now this gray or silver kind of look to the fur. And these dogs will also typically have blue, bluish gray, lavender, or flesh colored noses, lips, and eye rims, along with all the standard rust colored markings that any other Doberman has. One little side note, if you've ever heard of the fawn or Isabella colored Doberman, those dogs were actually meant to be the red Dobermans, except their parents had the color dilution gene, so it created more of a fawn color to their coats. Now let's talk about price for a second. Before I made this video, I reached out to a lot of owners of the blue Doberman to kind of gather some data about what these owners were paying for their dogs, and I found on average, people were spending between $400 to $800 on their blue Dobermans. Now this is a far cry from the normal price point for a purebred Doberman in the United States, which is somewhere around $1,500 to $2,500. There are some breeders out there, reputable ones, who will charge the same price as any other Doberman, or $1,500 to $2,500 for their blues. But it's generally considered to be a sign of a less than reputable breeder if they attempt to sell the dogs for an inflated price, claiming that they're in high demand or very rare. So, well, how rare are these dogs? Well, as I mentioned earlier, the Doberman Pinscher Club of America estimates that 8 to 15% of all Dobermans out there are the blue Dobermans. And really, this is just an estimate. They don't know the exact numbers. So are they rare? Well, I guess that depends on your perspective. I can tell you confidently where I live that Dobermans in general are rare. So personally, yes, I consider the blue Dobermans to be rare. Now, in the past, these dogs were heavily discouraged from breeding because a lot of the old Doberman pros would see these dogs as a mutated version of the Doberman and not fit for reproduction. There's a lot of people that still feel that way, and that's why you'll see these dogs going for a lot cheaper prices than the black or red counterparts. But they sure seem to be a lot more accepted in recent years. I mean, after all, they're part of the standard colors here in the United States now, and on occasion you'll even see them showing up in the show ring. But a lot of the diehards out there will say that you should never go to a blue or less common color breeder that specializes in those less common colors, and they'll cite concerns for limited gene pools and the potential for inbreeding. One little side note, guys, I've been told more than once that I need to include my opinion more often in these videos, so here we go. I disagree with these pros that say you need to avoid breeders who specialize in less common colors of the Doberman. And here's why. That blanket statement just doesn't settle well. The blanket statement of breeders of rare colors of Dobermans always participate in breeding. I don't think that's true. I think there are ethical and unethical breeders in all areas of the Doberman world, unfortunately. And to say that they stick to certain colors or don't do certain colors, and that determines whether or not they're ethical and unethical, that's just too broad of a blanket statement for me, and you'll never see me backing up a statement like that. So there you go, there's my personal opinion. Now for the health concerns of these blue Dobermans. Now these dogs have all the same health concerns that any other Doberman will have, plus a few extra that mainly have to do with their hair and their skin. Because their hair is brittle and tends to break more often, they're a little bit more prone to ingrown hairs and staph infections. But probably the biggest health concern of the blue Dobermans is a condition called color dilution alopecia, or CDA. It's also often just called blue Doberman syndrome. Now, this doesn't affect all blue Dobermans, but it is extremely common with them. The Doberman Pinscher Club of America estimates that anywhere between 50 to 90% of all blue Dobermans will develop CDA at some point in their lifetime. So this does make them the most likely of the 4 standard Doberman colors to develop this condition. And it can be anywhere from a really mild case to a pretty severe case. Okay, well, we know this condition is really common with the blue Dobermans, but what is it? Well, CDA isn't fully understood, but we know it affects the hair follicles on the dog's coat, and it leads to an abnormal distribution of melatonin into the hairs as they grow. And this causes the hairs to be a lot more brittle than normal, and they tend to break easier, and it can lead to just an overall thinning effect of the dog's coat or patchy hair loss. And it can also cause other things such as dry, flaky skin, these little red bumps that kind of look like acne. It can cause bacterial infections on the skin, especially with the dog scratching at it. It can make them more prone to sunburns. Generally, the hair loss that results from this is permanent, but it doesn't affect the overall health of the dog, other than in a couple of severe, sometimes severely untreated cases, they can lead to lower energy levels of the dog. Now, Dobermans that will develop this condition, they aren't really born with it. They come out looking pretty normal and their coats look great, but they'll generally start to show symptoms between around 6 months of age to 3 years of age. And the earlier that they show these symptoms, generally the worse the case will be. Now, there are all different colors of blues. There's some of the really light colored blues and the darker colored ones. The darker colored blue Dobermans are less likely to develop CDA than the lighter blue colors are. Now, as far as treatment goes for this, there is no cure for it, and generally the hair loss is considered permanent, but there is some recent data to suggest that melatonin supplementation might help to reverse some of this hair loss, and also it's believed that supplementing with some essential fatty acids, some vitamin A supplements, or even just making sure they have a nutritional diet will help to prevent this condition from developing in the first place. But generally, your vet will probably just recommend some specialized shampoos and ointments, and maybe some changes to their diet if your dog is diagnosed with this. So basically, these dogs are just like any other Doberman out there, really. You just need to pay a little more attention to their nutritional needs, their skin and their hair, and maybe keep an eye out for some of the signs of CDA. And I know I spent a lot of time talking about color dilution alopecia in this video, but because it's one of the biggest concerns of these blue Dobermans, it just really needed to be addressed. But it's worth mentioning or reiterating that these dogs don't always get this. So just because you have a blue Doberman doesn't mean you're for certain going to get these conditions. But they're great, loving dogs just like any other Doberman. Now, one of the many projects that I'm working on here, guys, is I'm trying to make a video about every single color and every single type of Doberman that's out there so that you can make an educated decision when you go to pick out your first Doberman. So if you want to keep getting access to this information that I'm working so hard to bring you, just hit that subscribe button down below and the little bell icon that comes up. That way you'll get notified when I release my next video. And guys, thank you so much for your support on this channel. It means the world to me. And of course, I'll see you next time.